So welcome to our workshop on introductions, effectively beginning an essay. Before we start, I wanted to let you know, feel free to pause at any moment in time to reread the slides or to practice some of the skills that we're talking about. This workshop is meant for you to follow along your journey in writing the introduction.
So to start, first we have to ask what an introduction even is. So an introduction to an essay is the first paragraph or paragraphs that lets your reader get acquainted to the topic you are writing about. The point of the introduction is that it enables your reader to better understand the scope of your main point and why you're making it.
So if that's what an introduction is, what goes into an introduction? Usually the introduction contains three main components. These components usually take the shape of what we call a funnel. So it starts with the most broad information and narrows down into your main point, right? Which would be the thesis. So it starts broad and ends up narrowing by the end. So the first component is the hook. This is the sentence or two that really grabs the reader's attention, hooks them into your writing. The second component is any of the necessary background information that your reader might need in order to understand your topic. You can't just kind of jump in right into your argument. You have to provide some of that context for them. And the third component is the thesis. And this is that main or central argument that you're trying to make, the point of the whole paper. And so it starts broad and ends with the most specific.
So we're going to break down these components now, starting with the hook. So the hook, as we said before, is meant to grab the reader's attention. It's supposed to be what makes your reader feel compelled to keep reading and figure out what you're on about. It's the first sentence or sentences that they'll read, so they count. Here are some strategies for you to potentially get started. An anecdote can be a good way to start a hook. It can be a story, your own story, someone else's story, as long as it relates to your central topic. It can be a relevant quote from maybe a work that you're working with or something that speaks to your topic. It can also be a definition, which should only be used if the reader's understanding of your main point is reliant on their understanding of a certain term. So as we said before, it starts off pretty broad. You have a lot of room to hook your reader in before you get into the specifics of your main point.
So one thing that's important with the hook is to avoid cliches. As writers, it's super easy to fall into certain cliches. It's sort of just how we think. Here are some examples of things that are effective, some effective hooks and some cliches to avoid. So the effective hooks would be, when reading a personal essay, it is difficult to not imagine that the words on the page are that of the authors themselves. So this is very specific. I can tell that this is going to be some kind of personal statement. It's already introducing me as a reader to the topic. And the next one is a quote, right? So I can tell that that's probably what the paper is going to be about. These are maybe some concepts that we're going to be working with. Now, some cliches to avoid, you'll notice that these are very broad. So we have in this day and age, since the beginning of time, everybody knows that, and throughout history. While these are great in conversation, they're a little too broad and a little cliche for writing. So we want to start directly at our topic because that's what your reader's here for, not for a lesson on what happened since the beginning of time. So if you're writing about houseplants, for example, make sure your first sentence includes something about that subject or topic.
The second part of the funnel is the background information. So once you start your introduction and hooked your reader's attention, you want to start to provide the necessary background information for your reader to understand your main point. This is the part where you start developing from a more broad point to, or a general point to a more specific point. You can ask yourself, what does my reader need to know about my topic to understand my argument? Are there any terms that I need to define? So for example, continuing on, say we're writing about houseplants, you might start with when or how houseplants became popular and link that popularity to cultural trends, and then begin to narrow to your main point about them.
So the last component, that most narrow part of that funnel, is the thesis. So the thesis is, like I said, that last sentence, or sentences if it's a complex essay and it maybe takes more than one sentence to complete that. So the thesis focuses on your main argument and explains the importance of that argument to your reader. So an example of a thesis might be, houseplants are a wonderful tool for promoting positivity because although they can be messy, their greenery provides a sense of calm to those around them. So you can see how that's very specific. So if our hook is something very broad and general about houseplants, our thesis really tells the reader exactly what we're trying to say and why we're saying it about that topic. And for more information on creating a thesis, because I know this is a little quick, please feel free to see our whole other video workshop on creating thesis statements for more information.
So once you kind of have those components in place, go ahead and reread the introduction, and you can ask yourself some questions to measure how effective your introduction is. The first question would be, does it introduce the reader to your topic? You want to make sure that you're staying focused on what information is actually important, or that your reader needs to know for context. Are there transitions between the sections? Going from the hook to the background information, everything should be connected by your general topic. Does the paragraph flow from one idea to the next without leaving logical leaps that the reader has to take? And again, the best way to avoid that is sticking to information that's pertinent to your topic. The last question you can ask yourself is your thesis clearly written and in the correct spot? Your thesis should be at the end of your introduction after you've provided all the background information in the hook, and it should be a statement that builds off of the background context that you provided. If the answers to these questions is yes, then you're ready to move on to the rest of your paper. But remember that writing doesn't have to be linear. You can come back to the introduction at any time and rewrite different sections as you work through the rest of your paper. And that is our presentation on introductions. Feel free to go and check out our presentation on conclusions to see how you can end your paper.
So let's take a look at an example of an introduction. So here, this introduction has all the three components of a typical introduction: the hook, which is in yellow, the background information, which is in green, and the thesis in blue. So let's read through it together to see how these three components fit together to form this sample introduction about houseplants. So the hook says, American singer-songwriter, actor, model, and fashion designer Beth Ditto once said, "A beautiful houseplant is like having a friend around the house." Many people feel similarly, demonstrating how meaningful having houseplants can be to people. So you can see that this section starts with a quote that's related to houseplants. So this is meant to hook people in right from the start. And it definitely follows one of those strategies that we mentioned earlier. So the next section would be the background information. So here we're trying to provide a little bit of information about houseplants that people might need to sort of understand the context or the span of this argument. We're also still trying to be a little bit broad and narrow as we go along. So each sentence should become a little bit more narrower than the one before, leading to our final section of the thesis. So let's read through that background information. Houseplants come in many shapes and sizes: tall and thin, short with large leaves, some with delicate flowers, and some strong enough to bust through concrete. They also come in various colors and textures, spanning pinks, greens, purples, and browns. This ensures that they can be a good design choice for any home or office, fitting into any color scheme or palette. But while they may look good aesthetically, many people question getting one because of the mess that houseplants can create and because of the amount of time that goes into their maintenance. So here we started kind of broad. We talked about maybe the shapes and the colors, sort of giving context to what we're talking about, houseplants in general, and sort of what they are, and ending pretty narrowly, talking about their aesthetic, but also the fact that people may question it. Is it a good idea or is it not a good idea to have houseplants? This is setting up room for my thesis, which is going to say, while these are valid concerns, people should bring plants into their home and office spaces because they improve productivity and mood and can help clean the air, benefits that outweigh the concern of any mess or maintenance requirements. So that hits at exactly what this paper is trying to say. So from the hook, the most broad, to the thesis, the most narrow, every sentence in here talks about houseplants, references something about houseplants, and helps guide the reader from one thought to the next without any logical leaps. So why don't you go ahead and try it on your own?